MR340 paneler, blah, blah.
Welcome to 340 Live. Today we are dealing with checkpoints and strategies, sort of looking at what to expect from the checkpoints, which ones are good, which ones will be problematic, and dealing with strategy. And to join us in this endeavor, we have Denise Damon, who is a four-time veteran of 340, and you said five-time ground crew veteran as well.
Yep.
So great experience there. We have with us Ozzy Larsen, who is an ultramarathoner, done some fantastic work on the 340, and I have absolutely nothing on off the top of my head otherwise, apart from he's blonde and did really well when he cheated with Rusty Self this weekend.
I was called a house wrecker more than once.
That was it was a good time at the shootout.
That's a good time.
Finally, the man, the myth, the legend. It is said that he is so committed to the 340 that he actually shaves his head to save himself an extra few seconds, just in case Ryan Slebos were to enter. Yes, we have the legendary Joe Mann.
Thank you very much.
And of course, myself, Chris Lidke, as the host and 340 paddler, as seven-time veteran, yada, yada, yada. And as usual, we will go through, we have our panelists. I have sort of a list of questions to deal with. If you have a question as a participant, go ahead and leave it in the Q&A on Zoom. I do not have access like Steve usually does to the YouTube live, so I don't see the questions there. So if anyone sees one, put it up as one of the questions that will help in the Q&A, because I have access to that. Otherwise, we will get to questions primarily at the end of the webinar, the last 10 to 20 minutes or so, unless it's particularly relevant to what we're dealing with. So without further ado, let's talk about checkpoints. Let's start there first. And I want to avoid going down the river and dealing with each individual point because that's boring, and many of us visited the first 4 or 5 this weekend. So let's start here. How often do you stop? And let's start with Denise on this one. Do you stop at every checkpoint, every point along the river? How often do you stop?
I usually, the first day I don't stop till Waverly.
Okay.
And then after that, I would say every 6 to 10 hours.
Wow.
Basically.
Okay.
For me.
So from Waverly, where would you generally get? From Waverly, where would you generally get?
I have usually stopped in Miami, but last year I only went to as far as Dalton Bottoms because I couldn't hold my eyes open anymore. Probably it'll be Glasgow from now on. So.
Wow. Okay.
I don't feel for me that carrying extra water and food slows me down that much at my pace.
So you're going some pretty long distances there. So you might stop 3 times a day, twice a day.
Yeah.
Somewhere there. All right. Let's go over to Ozzy. Where's your first stop and how often do you stop?
I have stopped, my first 340, I stopped at second Waverly and then Miami and then Glasgow. The second time I did it, second Waverly, and then straight to Glasgow.
Okay.
And this year too, I'll do the same thing, second Waverly and then Glasgow. The first day the adrenaline's just going, so I might as well just use that and go as far as I can.
Yeah, use the energy that you have while you
Absolutely.
have it.
Yeah, while you have it. Yeah, and then probably go to Franklin Island after that,
Okay.
and then maybe catch some sleep there, and then move on.
Okay. And Joe?
So I've done it 15 times, 14 times, 13 times, some 14 times. I don't know, lose track now.
Give us a rough average as a solo.
Well,
where's your first stop and how often?
For the last 5 or 6 years, my first stop is Miami. But that's not the first place I get a resupply. So my strategy typically is stay in the channel as much as possible and don't make a stop where you have to go out of the channel for the stop. So for example, Lexington is out of the channel, right? It's on the wrong side of the river, and it's a first official checkpoint. So a lot of people stop there. It's a zoo, it's a circus. I don't ever stop. Just like, you said, Denise and Ozzy, like it's not a great place to stop. But I typically go kind of close to the ramp or those little stone steps in Napoleon, which is 40 miles in. And my crew kind of like just hands me something real quick. I won't really stop. I'll just get really close and they'll just hand me some extra water, or food or whatever, or both. And that'll get me, from the start to the 40-mile point, and then I'll go from there to Miami. So my first official stop that I'll actually get out of the boat, and do kind of a pit stop, you could say, would be Miami.
And then how often do you stop during the race after that point? Is there a ballpark or?
Yeah, so I try to break the race into shifts. So it's like day shift, night shift, and then depending on how many days you're doing it. So like day shift 1, night shift 1, day shift 2, night shift 2, day shift 3. So that's kind of how I break it down in my mind. And then I'll have like where I stop will be at the end of a shift. So I'll stop at the end of day shift 1. I'll stop at the end of night shift 1. So for me, that's Hartsburg.
Okay.
It's on the channel side of the river. It's before Jeff City, and it's a small ramp, but it's easily accessible. It's a quick in and out, right? So that's how I break up my days. But then I'll have my shifts, but then I'll have a resupply in between, a little kind of handoff, so to speak, somewhere in the middle of the shift.
Okay. And Ozzy, how often do you stop after we get into the race, after you get past Waverly, Miami, Glasgow?
I stop at Glasgow for a little bit, 20 minutes maybe, in and out, get stuff changed out, and then Franklin Island or Hartsburg, one of the two, depending on the mood, depending on the fog and all that. And then I make it to Chamois, and then from Chamois all the way in.
So you're actually extending as you go. You have more breaks at the front and night 1, and then you're extending.
Yep, I have a long first shift and a long last shift, yes.
Okay.
And in between, kind of get out the boat. That's the second day is the rough day, kind of. But yeah, try to, at the end there, leaving Chamois night or the evening of day 2, and then just letting it all go all the way in, because, yeah, all sorts of weird stuff are showing up at night too, so might as well go all the way in.
This is true. So what checkpoints do we all avoid? I'll start with Lexington. If you've watched my videos on YouTube, you know Lexington is not a great stop. It takes a good 5 minutes to get there from the opposite side of the river. You stop, you do whatever, you get back out. Even fast, it's going to eat 15 minutes. So let's take Lexington off the table. Are there any other common stops that we avoid? Start with Ozzy, since you're already blown up on my screen.
I avoid Miami, and I avoid Waverly, the first Waverly.
And why do you avoid Miami?
Bad experience in Miami. Just parking situation. People at the ramp, it's small. I just avoid it because it's a zoo and you got to wait in line and all that, and I just won't do that. And then I avoid Herman just because at that time of night it starts looking weird. It's just my mind's wandered off, and it's just aim for that green light and let it go.
Right.
Same with Klondike, Washington. I don't stop at that either. Very short stop at Glasgow. But beyond that's, except besides Lexington, I try to avoid all those. I like the smaller ramps, less traffic.
All right. Joe?
Yeah. So
which ones do you avoid? And more importantly, why do you avoid the ones that you avoid?
So I agree with Ozzy. I mean, you in some degree, you want to, as far as strategy and reason, you want to avoid big ramps that are off channel, busy ramps that are off channel, I would say, right? That's kind of the rule, right? So if you can find ramps that are on channel, that are easy, less trafficked by the bulk of the racers, then obviously it's going to just by default save you time. I always stop at Miami though, unlike Ozzy, because that's my first stop of the day. But again, I think it depends on where you are in the time of day and night, right? So I typically can get to Miami before dark, but you know, if Miami was in dark, then I would probably stop at Waverly instead, you know. So I'd want my first shift stop to be still in daylight, so you can kind of see what you're doing. It's tough when it's dark and you know, when you're trying to clean your boat out, change jugs and all that kind of stuff. One of the other ramps I always avoid, and again, depends on your purpose, right? If your purpose is to finish the race and have a great time doing it, and do it as well as you can, but still have a great time doing it and have the experience of it, you have to stop in Jeff City, and you should stop in Herman, because they're both great cities, and the ambassadors to those cities are always there, especially Jeff City. You know, and Wilson's Serenity Point, named after the late Joe Wilson, who's an amazing man. That's the finish of the Freedom Race. That's the boat ramp in Jeff City. It's an amazing place to stop, and I have stopped there before, but it's off channel. Like you said about Lexington, it takes you 15 minutes to get off and 15 minutes to get back on. It's always really busy because it's a very big ramp. It's Jeff City, so there's lots of folks. So I have not stopped during the MR340 at Jeff City in probably 8 years. But if I wanted to experience the race the first time and I wasn't, you know, in a dead heat of, you know, competition, then I would recommend stopping at Jeff City to experience it.
All right. And Denise?
Yeah, well, you know, I agree with you about Lexington, and I'm starting to agree with Ozzy about Miami. If you're getting in as a slower, you know, more human, regular paddler is going to get in at night, it's become a zoo. I actually was paddling with somebody in 2018. We tried to land there. We literally spent, because they needed a bathroom, the person I was with needed a bathroom. We literally spent 20 minutes in a scrum playing bumper boats trying to get ashore. And this was like 10 o'clock at night. Now I'm sure when Joe gets there, it's fine. But for, you know, people paddling at a slower pace, you know, it's, you know, it's tricky. I mean, but it's for paddlers who are going to sleep. That's often, you know, a commonplace for newer paddlers, slower paddlers to choose to sleep on night one. And so it's just a zoo trying to get in, trying to get your boat up the ramp. There's a line of people launching, a line of people trying to land. It's become very difficult. It used to be one of my favorites, and now I'm down to avoiding it.
I mean, but even like you said, Denise, even when I was like the first couple of years when the race was, you know, 100 boats or 150 boats compared to what it is today. I mean, I stopped at Miami the first couple of years and I slept in Miami. And I remember, you know, at 4:30 in the morning, you know, somebody, I think one of the amazing Boy Scout guys who were going to make pancakes for everyone the next morning, they were having trouble with their generator and it wouldn't, like they kept trying to pull the cord on the generator. It was like making so much noise, and like everyone was like upset because they couldn't sleep, and it was a disaster. And like you said, the boats were piled everywhere, and then some fishermen showed up in the morning, you know, to go fish. And it was, yeah, it is, Miami does get to be a zoo as soon as like dark falls, because a lot of people try to sleep there. So if you can avoid that and spread out, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Glasgow is the same way. It's very noisy. I tried to sleep there once, and it's too noisy, too many people arguing, and where's my this, where's my that, and slamming of doors nonstop. So we just keep going to Franklin Island, and there's peace and quiet, and you can actually sleep pretty easy there.
And I'll throw out one other one that has at least driven me nuts over the years is New Haven. It's not a regular checkpoint, but it's a boat ramp that everyone knows about. And out of 7 trips down the 340, I have actually successfully landed at New Haven once. I have hallucinated past New Haven multiple times.
Yep.
But that one's a rough one too, because it's hidden behind a wing dike. So if you miss it, you're in trouble. So how do you decide what stops you're going to make, at least initially going into the race? What is the factor that decides for you how often you're going to stop? And let's start with Denise on this one.
Food and water supply, of course, how much I want to carry, what I like to eat. I'm not one who can, I can't do the live on supplements. I can't drink those liquids. So I eat real food. So, sometimes I bring some with me, but when that's gone, I need a resupply. Need for the bathroom, there's some stuff you can't do in the boat. How sleepy I am. And once the race is underway, weather and barges factor into that too. Sometimes I might have meant to go a little further, but there's a storm coming in. I've been lucky enough to sleep through a couple of storms, and I was happy to be in a tent and dry and maybe getting a little bit of sleep at least, as opposed to sitting on a muddy riverbank somewhere. Again, not trying for the podium. You have that luxury. So.
Okay, so food and water is the big limitation.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go over to Ozzy.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have about 6 liters of liquid nutrition with me, and that lasts only for so long. So I try to kind of get a ramp close to that timing, usually between 9 to 12 hours on the water. I have a fairly slow, this year we're going to do a fairly slow tandem boat, big and heavy. So we're trying to between 9 and 12 hours between each stop. And that's normally what my gluteus maximus can handle as well. So.
All right. And Joe, how do you plan on making stops? Or you just stop in St. Charles?
Well, that's where I can finally stop. But like I said, I try to break it up in shifts, right? So what I'll do ahead of time is, and now we're shifting a little bit more from checkpoints to strategy, at least in my answer, if that's okay. I look at the water level of the year, because the water level has historically ranged from, an average of 40,000 cubic feet per minute to 120,000, over the course. And so Doug Robinette put together a really nice spreadsheet that has historically tracked all of the water speeds on the River Miles forum. So if you can go back and look at that. It says, I think it's historical data. It's flagged up at the top of the forum on the MR340 forum. And basically all the data that I've done, and I've done some research and pulled in a lot of historical data, including wind, weather, water speed, whether it's a rising river, whether it's a lowering river, and basically it doesn't matter. All the negative factors put together, all the positive factors put together, you're basically going to get somewhere between a 2.5 mile an hour push at the very worst to a 4 mile an hour push at the very best on average over the course. So if you say to yourself, I'm a 4 mile an hour flat water paddler that I can maintain that speed forever, then you're going to be between 6.5 and 8 miles an hour over the course of the race. And then you just do the math and you say, okay, if I'm doing this speed on average, here's where I'm at the end of when the sun goes down, because you can find what the sun, you can look online and find it when the sun rises and the sun sets. And that's how I plan my deal. So I know when I know what my flat water speed is. I can anticipate more or less within a 0.5 mile an hour what kind of push I'm going to get from the river, and then I can plan my days. So I do it by shifts. I say day shift, night shift, day shift, night shift, and then that's where I kind of more or less plan my stops.
And this is where I'm going to throw a plug in for one of Joe's races. Missouri Freedom comes up, 3-4 weeks before the 340. And that's a great place to find out what your pacing and speed is going to look like during the 340. Going down there, getting a sense of the river is probably one of the best things you can do in terms of strategy. So,
yeah, we actually started in Midwest paddle racing and the Freedom Race 10 years ago for the sole purpose of having a really great tune-up, 3 weeks before the 340. So we always wait until, the MR340, that used to be Scott and now it's Steve, schedules the race. And then we say, okay, and we look at the calendar and go 3.5 weeks back from there. And we say, okay, that's where the Freedom Race is going to be. So folks can have that opportunity to kind of do that last tune-up.
Yep. And it works great.
Thank you.
Now, how do you handle shore time? This is always a big part of checkpoints. I mean, we can talk about who has the best food and the best bathrooms and the best showers. Chamois has the best showers. But How do you handle shore time? Let's start with Ozzy on this one. How much time do you take on shore? What goes into it? How do you decide how long you're going to be on there?
We run it pretty NASCAR style pit stop, very process oriented. Do A, then B, then C, then D. My ground crew thinks that way. I, as a paddler, do the same. So, an in and out for me is about 20 minutes. That includes getting out of the boat, turning the boat around, getting ground crew, getting it ready, in and out of bladders, quick connects. I walk around a little bit as a paddler to kind of stretch, get some blood circulations everywhere, and then back in the boat and go. Very little short time wandering around and visiting. I'm more of the competitive mindset, if you will. So in and out as fast as I can. Yeah, not much on shore. I think my longest stop, or our longest stop last year, was maybe 35 minutes, but that was in a delusional state at Chamois trying to push off.
Well, yeah, let me just say, if you're completely delusional or your paddler is completely delusional, keep them on shore for a little while.
Yeah, exactly.
We'd rather have, a slightly slower and living paddler than anything else.
No, as you get tired, the mind wanders, and do I have this and I have that. So what actually me and the ground crew do is write all these things down ahead of time. I know it sounds weird and nerdy and corny, but my ground crew have a list of here are the things that needs to happen at this stop based on previous experience and all the advice that I've gotten on through the paddling group, such as turning the lights on, change the batteries, give me the dry bag, I need 4 bottles of water. All these things are written down. So as both paddler and ground crew gets tired, instead of standing on the ramp going, wow, there's something else, I keep forgetting, what is it, right? We write it down. And that's how the ground crew keeps the paddler straight. And as a paddler, I don't really have to think about what do I need. I get another 6 liters of liquid. I get a small food bag. I have a dry bag that gets attached with different things, and then off I go. So all of those things I've thought through ahead of time.
Okay.
I have checklists and all this and that.
And Denise, how do you? What do you do at the checkpoints? What sort of time do you have there?
Well, I do some things a little different than what Scott and others would do. Typically I hit the ramp. I get out. I stretch. I eat first. I know you're supposed to eat on the river, but if I eat first thing, then we get the boat restocked, and then hopefully I make it to the bathroom before I get back on the river, which is one of my main reasons I'm stopping, honestly. Of course, you got to learn how to pee in the boat. Everyone has to, even the ladies, but there's some stuff you can't do in the boat. So for that, I usually eat first, and then hopefully that's my last stop, is that little shelter by the ramp, and then I get back on the water and go.
Okay.
My goal is to either be eating, visiting the facilities, or sleeping. Other than a little bit of walking around, I don't want to be. I'm not sitting around chit-chatting. I want to be either asleep, feeding myself, or making use of the amenities.
It's actually really good advice for anyone paddling the 340. And Joe, what do you do in the 4 seconds that you're on shore?
Well, to Ozzy brought up a good point, and I wrote it down to made a note of it. But which is I plan what I want at the stops, and typically you can kind of sum it up with plan on what you need, but be ready to adjust. Right, and so I might say, okay, I'm going to stop at Miami. That's my first stop. I know that's where I'm stopping because that's, like we talked about earlier, that's where I like to stop. And on my end of my day shift, I'm only planning on getting, this liquid, this food, this etc. I'm going to change my shirt. I'm going to take a, by the way, if it's hot, if it's a really hot year and you're sweating a lot, have your crew get a towel, like a kitchen towel size that's already wrung out and wet and clean with water. Change your shirt, change your pants, clean your clothes, wipe down, wipe that sweat off your body, because you have salt crystals that you'll have, and then that'll start chafing over time, and you'll start chafing with your clothing. So do a whole like garment change and clean off and get some Vaseline or some Sport Slick and put it in every crease and crevice that you can imagine, and you will be so happy at the end of the race if you do that compared to if you don't. But that's what I do when I stop is like do that kind of body maintenance, while my ground crew does the very thankful and not fun work of cleaning out my boat. And then I'll get, but like they'll have it laid out, all my stuff. So I may not want to, need a rudder cable. Hopefully I don't. But we have a toolbox down there with rudders, cables, with extra rudder, with tools. So everything could possibly go wrong. They've kind of got it ready for me in a little fold out trolley wagon thing. The plan is, this is what I need. This is what I'm going to do. But if there's an emergency, we have some backup things as well. So plan for this, but be prepared to readjust if necessary.
Yep.
Nice.
We had that. We last year we went tandem, so we have this same roller cart, and then we have a small bin for each paddler, where you can, as a paddler, you can stand there and grab whatever you feel like.
Exactly.
Right? But then the other part of the cart is then for the ground crew. In my case, have a list of things, but so we're not wandering back and forth and going through the car like, well, I thought I brought this and that, and I got to find it. None of that stuff. All that is laid out, like you said, Joe, ahead of time and planned out ahead of time.
And if you're lucky enough to have, good enough friends and family that want to be a ground crew for you, right? What we have found, what I've found out is it's always great to have, one or two individuals, depending on the size of your team. If you're a solo, you just need one, right? Or, or if you have a tandem or multi-man, it helps to have multiple, but have one or two people taking care of the racers, but then have another person who's dedicated to take care of them. So if I'm a solo boat, I always want two, at least, maybe two, and have one guy taking care of me, and then I want another guy taking care of him. So he doesn't have to worry about himself. He's only worrying about me. But then this guy's, I'm worrying about him, right? So if you've got a tandem team, you have one or two taking care of the racers. Then you have a third person that says, I'm going to take care of these guys. What do you need? You take care of the racers. I'm going to take care of them. And it, like that pyramid approach really works well.
Yep.
Yeah,
like you said, Ozzy, you're not standing there going, well, I thought I needed this. What did I need? Did you do this? Did you do this? No, because that other person in the background, she's saying, hey, did you guys remember this? Did you guys remember this? She's taking care of the guys taking care of the racers, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And back to Ozzy's cart of doom and Joe's cart of doom. My wife does the same thing. We have a backpack with what seems like 1,000 pockets, which has labels on it. Here's the blister Band-Aids. Here's the repair kit. Because I keep a small repair kit in the boat, sufficient to get me 6 hours
right.
If something goes wrong, to repair just about anything. But then she has the full repair kit. So we can do some significant repairs. For example, if I were to sink my boat at Cooper's Landing and still need to finish. So, it's always a good thing. So when we're dealing with checkpoints, we of course have to deal with the question of, how does your ground crew get you back in the boat? Paddlers, let's start with Ozzy on this one. What's the best way to get Ozzy back in the boat?
My wife is the ground crew, so I get the stare. No, there is probably more of an internal drive for us. It's like, if she says you guys are good to go, then we just like, all right, let's go then. Why are we standing here? Let's go. There's not a signal or anything more than that. If the ground crew is done with the boat, we can go. And that's, that and the stare helps a lot.
The stare. And Denise, how do you, what does your ground crew do to push you off the ramp?
I don't know. Usually I to get, I'd like to get out within about 30 minutes. I don't always hit that target. I'd be lying if I said I did. It's harder in the, like if I'm sleeping to get me up and going, that is a little harder. So, but if it's just a short break, I'm usually pretty well motivated to get back out there. But yeah, if it's an overnight, then I'm like, it's still too foggy. I don't want to go yet, that kind of thing. He could probably use, I'm going to have him watch this. So some ideas.
And Joe, when you get to that level, do you need motivation to get back in the boat, or is it pretty much you just go, hey, let's go?
No, of course, everybody needs, there's not a race I've ever done that I haven't thought about quitting. Right. And West Hansen told me that 15 years ago. Right. And West Hansen was the legend then, so I think, and let's frame this first. Let's frame this whether you're a soloist or whether you're in a team. Okay. Because when you're a soloist, let's be real. You're out there by yourself. It's lonely. It really sucks, right? The first time I was on the Missouri River alone at night in a tiny little boat, every log looked like an alligator, every twig looked like a snake, every tree looked like a dinosaur in the night, in the moonlight, right? It was weird. It was intimidating. It was scary. So there's a comfort level that comes with it after doing it so many times. And now I'm like, yeah, big deal. But I've done it, for 15 years. So if you're a soloist, it's tough to just like push out and you're like, oh, I want to stay here with my friends and my ground crew and where it's nice and warm and comfortable. Right. So I think, if you're a team, it's a little easier. So I think if you're the ground crew, you need to look at, so if you have a soloist, if you're taking care of a soloist, tell them, hey, you got to get back out there. Like, look them in the eye, make sure they're, have the ability to make some competent decisions, right? They seem like they're with it, right? Because you can get too tired, right? You don't want them to be in danger. But just reassure them, hey, I'm going to be at the next point. Like, get out there. We're going to go meet you. Don't worry, right? We're going to see you to the next stop. So motivate them. Tell them everything's great. Be positive, right? They're going to start talking. If they're a soloist, they're going to go, I don't know if I can do it. They're going to say things like, oh, I'm tired. I don't know. Maybe my wrist hurts. So decide what the difference is between pain and injury. Okay. There's a difference between pain and injury. If you do the MR340, everyone's going to have pain. End of story, right? Is it pain or is it injury, right? You don't want to do something that's going to give you a negative impact for the rest of your life or do something that's going to have to cause surgery or whatever, right? But if it's just pain, yeah, guess what? Your butt's going to hurt because you're sitting in the same chair for 50 hours, right? Your muscles are going to be sore because you're doing the same movement for 50 hours. You signed up for this. Suck it up. Get out there. I'll meet you at the next point. Be motivating, right? That's what I would say. The ground crew plays a big part in that.
And now I have a question that always comes up. People are always asking, can you see the checkpoints easily at night as a paddler? I know what my answer is, but let's start.
It's tough.
Yeah, we can.
No, you go ahead.
Let's start with Denise.
I was going to say checkpoints you can see, but other ramps and other stops, not so easily. There's a blue beacon at the actual checkpoints, but the other stops can be a little hard to, some of the paddle stops and the non-paddle stops in particular, Hartsburg or Mocaine, places like that. But I find those hard to find at night. Got to get your big flashlight out, and the Pro Paddler app can help with that because you can, it sort of keeps you up to date with, oh wait, it should be right over there. If your ground crew's there, if they can put some lights out, that would be helpful. But yeah, I find some of them. New Haven, you already mentioned, is really hard. It's hard to see. If there's no lights out at the end of that ramp or at the end of that wing dike, you're like, is that it? Is that it? I don't know. Maybe, very difficult, I think.
And Ozzy?
Well, people have missed the finish line. So it can be hard sometimes depending on the amount of sleepiness you're into. But I think most of them are easy to find if you kind of have a mileage tracker on you of some sort, like it's supposed to be between this mile and that mile. It should be fairly easy to find. There's a couple that can be harder, like the unmanned ramps or hidden ramps are harder to find. But beyond that, it should be fairly easy to find.
Okay, and Joe.
So it's always difficult to see a ramp at night. Don't underestimate how hard it is to see in the dark, because your depth perception is off. Shadows play a huge role. So if the moon's over here on this side, your moonlight's coming this way, you can see that shoreline. But everything between where the trees block the moonlight and this side of the water, you have no idea if you're 5 feet from shore or 100 feet from shore or 300 feet from shore. And so when you have ramps like Washington, where they have that big rock, thing, you'll come around that big, huge bend, and you'll see the city, and you'll see the lights, and then all of a sudden it will all disappear because it's so high, it's dark, and then you'll think, what happened to the city? Did it just disappear? And then you'll get closer, and you'll come around, and then you'll see it again. And then the ramp, when you go under the bridge, it looks like you're paddling off of an infinity pool, and you're going to drop off the edge of the world, right? Have you guys seen that? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you go on the bridge, and then what now?
You have to say to yourself, I know the Missouri River does not have a waterfall in it. Like, it does not drop. You have to tell yourself that, because this looks like I'm going to paddle off the edge of a cliff. So your eyes play tricks on you. And then when you're not in full capacity because you haven't slept for 2 days or whatever, don't underestimate. It's difficult to find. So if you're planning, I would say, if you're planning on meeting your crew somewhere at a boat ramp in the middle of the night, especially if it's one that's not a checkpoint, like Denise said, because even the little blue lights and the flags, you can see them when you're 30 feet away, but when you're, a quarter mile away, you can't see it, but you think you're right there because your GPS says, well, I'm at mile 178.2, and this is supposed to be at 178.4. Why don't I see it yet? Well, you can't see a blue light that's 6 inches around, quarter mile away. So get your ground crew should know to try to anticipate when you're going to be there. So they left you at this checkpoint the last time they saw you. They know your average speed is going to be X. That means X hours and minutes. You should arrive more or less at this time. So 15 minutes before you should arrive, or 20 minutes before you're supposed to arrive, have them get out to the edge of the ramp, and like you said, Denise, shine a light, do something, because you can see that, and then you go, okay, that's where I'm supposed to go. That's where I need to be. Don't just sit up in the car and say, well, we'll get a nap until my guy shows up, because he might just miss it because he doesn't see anything.
Yeah, and if you have a light as a ground crew, don't light it at the paddler. You can't see nothing. Yeah, light it well in front of them, or light up the ramp
up in the air, or the ramp. Yeah, exactly.
We can't see. It was one year we came into Chamois, and somebody had a fantastic flashlight and blinded us completely, and it was hard to see until they put that spotlight on the ramp. That's when we knew that, okay, here's where it's at.
Yeah, lights can make a huge difference. And when you get a light or you're going to signal to your paddler, think about two things. First of all, does it look anything like the little light that goes on the end of a fishing pole that they use for catfishing at night? Because if it does, I'm going to run my boat through it. I did that on the Rock River. Secondly, does it cause more hallucinations? Because that has also happened to me. You don't want to do that. Keep it pretty plain and simple, and do not flash it in the eyes of the paddler. So I want to kind of turn towards race strategy here. And this is where we're really going to start, changing or dividing up the panel a little bit, since obviously Joe's race strategy is going to be very different from, say, mine or Ozzy's or Denise's. So do you guys come into the race with a set race strategy, with a set race goal that you're aiming for? Let's start with Ozzy since you're already on my screen.
Yes, I do. I have last year we had a goal of a sub 50. I've planned it out, stops, times to reach a sub 50. I get into kind of what Joe says too, like how fast is the water flowing? How fast did we run the boat in the shootout? What can our average speed be? And then try to match the time to make a sub 50, meaning that I have to be in second Waverly at a certain time. If I'm behind that, we got to either paddle faster, shorter stop, so that I actually go by every 2 miles, having a update on am I behind or are we behind or ahead, and so I knowing all the way into the end that yep, we are on track for the time that we set as a goal. So definitely having a strategy on time is.
So what happens when that falls apart? What happens when there's fog or a storm at Waverly and, you know?
Well, it hasn't fallen apart yet. Every year I've gotten ahead of time. So I still have a plan B. But yes, if we stop because of fog, thunderstorm and all that, I mean, then we're stopped, right? And then you can make it up where you can make it up. Last year, our plan was to sleep an hour and a half at Chamois. That ended up being a 20-minute nap. That's how we adjusted for it, because the river between Jeff City and Chamois can be really slow. And it didn't know about that. I didn't remember that from the previous race. So we made it up time by either A, not stopping, or make the stop a lot shorter.
Okay. Joe, race strategy, do you have one coming in, and what do you do when it breaks?
So I think what I always do is I make 3 sets of goals. So I make some very easy goals, I make some moderate goals, and I make some stretch goals. And then, the stretch goals may not be achieved, but that doesn't mean that I get disappointed that I don't reach them. If I get my moderate goals, then I'm happy. And if I get the easy goals, then that's kind of the bar where I say, okay, I've done what at least I needed to do. So easy goals would start with like, I'm finishing the race, right? Because it's not easy to finish the race. I have a DNF in the MR340, right? That will haunt me forever, but I have one. So, it starts with finishing the race, and then you kind of go from there and say, okay, maybe there's a time goal, maybe there's some other goals, maybe there, whatever your goals are, make a list of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and make them from easy to very, very difficult, with maybe the top one, one that you probably won't get, but you stretch for it, right? Reach for the stars, right? So that's kind of how I do it. And then as long as you end up in the middle somewhere, you can be very happy and satisfied with what you've done, and you can check a few things off the list.
All right. And Denise, how do you come up? Do you have a race strategy going in, and what do you do when it breaks?
I could tell you a story. Generally, my goal is to finish and hopefully, better than my best time. That I'm not going to be a podium, never going to be on the podium. That's not even in my, not something I'm working towards. Like I said, I jokingly say that I'm a bucket lister who doesn't know when to quit. So I just keep coming back. But yeah, finishing is my primary goal. And then if I can improve my time, that would be good. So, this year I have always slept night 1 and night 2. So this year my plan is no sleeping on night 1. So we'll see how that does for me, and what kind of shape I'm in come night 2. So, I stopped the kind of loftier goals. I don't have like a list like Joe. Mine is finish and finish better than before. That would be my 1-2 punch of goal.
You bring up a good point, though, that I actually want to go to Joe more so because he's a 15-year veteran than anything else. Joe, what advice do you have for new paddlers or paddlers who are focusing on a time goal as opposed to, say, finishing?
This year, more than any, don't look at times from the last 4 or 5 years. We've had some really good water in 2015, 16, 18, 10 was good, but 15, 16, 18, and even last year in 20 wasn't bad. This year's looking like it's going to be like 2012, which was about as bad as it got. And
That was brutal.
I mean, Matt Dressler and Ryan Slebos and I were in a 3-man boat in 2012. It was the average the temperature, I think, was 112 on the heat index, and the average water speed was like 43,000 cubic feet. And it was like we finished in a 3-man boat in time of like 42 hours and some change, 42 and a half or something like that, right? It was miserable, right? I mean, if we had been in a good water year, we would have done 35 hours. I mean, so the point, and several years after, after like some really record years in like 14, 15, 16, people were upset that they weren't getting the speeds they wanted to get. So you really have to take into account, you should never make a speed record or say, oh, I'm going to try to break my speed from last year, because you have to look at the, Denise, you have to look at the water speed. So if you say, well, I want to do better than I did last year, that's a noble goal, and you can still do that, but with the paradigm or the shift, or within the perspective of the river's not giving you what it gave last year, which this year it will not, right? So not to be a downer on this conversation, but if this is your first or second or third year, just be aware, this is unless there's like a huge rainstorm, the week before the race, we are in preparation. You should be prepared to have a very, like a 2.5 to 3 mile an hour push, as opposed to a 3.5 to 4 mile an hour push, which we've been lucky enough to have over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and this is always a dangerous issue, because I see a lot of, especially second year, third year paddlers coming in with, well, I did 55 last year, I'm going to sub 50 this year, I'm going to sub 45. And the problem is the river is so variable, it is impossible to set a goal like that and really get that to work.
I mean, a half a mile an hour is what, 6 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'll have to look at my data, but more or less, right, 5 or 6 hours. So, if you have a half a mile an hour push difference from the river and a negative impact, then your 50-hour time just went to 56 hours. So you're gonna have to paddle 6 hours faster just to get the same time you did last year. So be aware.
And or 6 hours less on land. Right.
Or 6 hours less on land. And that's where you make it up, is you say, okay, how can I tweak the dials to.
And how does, let's go with some of the other things that we typically see on the 340, since you brought up 2012. How do you deal with heat on the river? If it's, almost every year, I can think of one or two maybe that I've raced that we didn't have a heat problem, but otherwise, at least one day we hit triple digits. 2012, we hit triple digits all 4 days. And I finished in 78 hours and got to suffer through all 4 days of it. My rookie year, yay, I came back. So how do you deal with heat? Let's start with that. Ozzy? I'll call on the Scandinavian first to deal with heat.
Thanks. I was used to 55 and 60 degree weather. I don't deal with the heat very well. I sweat a lot, and my sweat rate is fairly high. So try to dress light, drink a lot, don't get dehydrated, because that makes it snowballs pretty quick. I wear one of those weird hats that has the floppy things, and I dip that in the river all the time. My ground crew, what we do, we freeze water bottles solid a few days before the race, and we bring that in a cooler. So every stop I get a couple of ice water bottles that I keep in my lap, try to cool that off. I have a life jacket that is minimalist style, if you will, but it keeps me another shade of cool, and then cover up my legs so that I don't get heat on them or get sun direct on them, and sunscreen, and then hydration. That's what keeps me cool. And actually, staying on the water is better than staying on land. So I think it was in 18 Hartsburg. There's no shade in Hartsburg, none.
No, not really.
And
No.
we went straight back on the river because it was too hot, and we just went back and dipped ourselves in the water, sat on a ramp, put ourselves in the water a little bit, go back in the boat.
Okay. Denise, heat?
I wet down. I pour water over myself, over my shirt, over my head, over my hair. If it's really hot, we have a couple of times just, at a brief stop, just got in the river to cool off. And if I have ground crew, and I haven't always, but when I've had ground crew, he usually keeps me supplied with ice water. We put ice in the bladder, bladders when we do stop, so that I have some, and I have those in an homemade insulated thing made out of a windshield sunscreen. And that usually keeps water cold for 6 or 7 hours. That's pretty good. And on second and third day, I'm usually stopping about every 7 hours or so.
Okay. Joe, because you're going to have a very different strategy because you're trying to, go for a position such crazy hot weather. What do you do?
So body wise, I wear long sleeves, long pants, and a straw hat or cowboy hat or whatever, right? So try to keep the sun off your body as much as possible, for sure, right? And I mean, that year in 2012, I mean, I remember dipping, taking the hat off and dipping it in the water, or taking water and throwing it on me, and it would evaporate in 10 minutes. So but you can use evaporative cooling. Like Brian Hopkins always says, you use the river for evaporative cooling. You have water right there, so just throw the water on you, and it's fine. I mean, that helps a lot. But I would say definitely wear long sleeves and like tights. Academy sells the best. They're not a sponsor or anything. I'm just letting you know. Academy sells the best brand, BCG. It's like their house brand of tights, of long pant tights, for $20 or whatever. So I wear it, and you can take scissors and cut the pee hole in them, if you need. But those, they cover your legs. Get the long sleeves for the arms. Get a long hat. I always wear a bandana or a buff. So like if the sun's setting, it's on this side, I can tuck the bandana up into the hat on either side. So keep sun off your body, and you can keep those clothing articles wet, and that helps a lot. And then as far as the drinks go, make sure you're taking in a lot of electrolytes, not too much, but I use Hammer Heed and Gatorade. I use a combination of those two things, and then and I use like the Igloo jugs, and I take a tube with a Camelback bite valve, plugged into the tube, so that keeps it really cold the whole time I have it, and I just plug like the tube of like you can buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's, and you kind of shove that into the mouth, the drink, the mouth drink spout of the Igloo cooler, the little half-gallon ones or gallon ones, whichever one you want to get, and then have the Camelback bite valve in the other end of that, and then you can just hook that on somehow on a lanyard or even in your lap and pick it up when you want to drink. But that'll keep the liquid cold for hours and hours and hours.
And how do you adjust your race strategy on those hot days? Are you still pushing, hey, I need to stay in the lead, I need to stay, or does that change somehow? I mean,
if you're redlining, right? I mean, everybody knows you need to know your body well, right? And if you push too hard, you're going to go down a hole. Don't go down a hole, right? A lot of people go down a hole and then they can't get out of it, or they feel like they can't get out of it. You can probably get out of it, but it's going to take you longer to get out of it than if you just hadn't gone down the hole in the first place. So a great example is, we were in the shootout race 2 days ago, and we started out, and I was drafting a 3-man team, I said to myself, they went out too hot, and I'm drafting them, and it's too hot. So I pulled back, and I started drafting Ozzy and Rusty, and I was on the edge of redlining, but I was getting the draft, so I was keeping in there. But you got to make those adjustments and say to yourself, okay, this is too hot. I can't do this. Cool it back. Don't go down a hole, because you can always turn it on at the end. I mean, you can finish in a hole. Who cares? Because then you're done. But don't go down a hole in the beginning of the race, because then it's tough to get out. So take it easy. Keep hydrated. Have your electrolytes. Keep your cool. Cover yourself from the sun.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think that's a good point too. Is going down the hole, is you should have had enough training by the 340 to know when you are going down the hole. Like you can hold a certain speed for a certain time, right? Don't go above that in the excitement of the first day. And we see it a lot, the boats that are floating by Lexington, right? It's just don't go there. More so on a hot day.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. I love doing that live on camera. That's good.
It's good.
I think when it comes to heat, especially from someone from Wisconsin, just survive to fight another day might be a good strategy as well. Just sort of make it all right, it becomes a matter of just keep moving rather than, okay, I need to keep X pace and X time.
Yeah, take it easy during the day in the heat of the day. And then when the sun, like my favorite time on the MR340, like if you said, what is your favorite 15 minutes or favorite 30 minutes of the MR340 on any given year, doesn't matter what, it is the 30 minutes the sun dips behind the trees on the first day. Like, okay, the sun is no longer killing me. The cool air is starting to settle in. Here comes night. Let's turn it on, because that's when you can push a little harder. And because you're still like the second night you're dead and you don't care anymore, and you're like, I hate this race and I want to die. But the first night you're still excited, you're still jazzed up, the sun dips down and you're ready to go. So like that's the best. So make use of that time is my point. Take it, like you said, Chris, take it easy on the heat of the day. Don't kill yourself. Don't go down the hole. And then when the sun sets and it's cooler, now take advantage of that time from 7 or 8 p.m. until whenever you decide to stop and take a nap or sleep for the night. Like take advantage of that cooler temperature, cooler hours.
All right. I want to turn our attention to sleep strategy. This is something that affects probably the majority of the paddlers out there. There aren't too many of us that go through the race without sleeping. Joe, you've probably been a while since you've slept on the race. I think I've been 4 or 5 years since I've slept on the race, beyond maybe a 20-minute cat nap. So I'm going to go with Denise on this one. And then Ozzy, how do you handle sleep during the race? What's your strategy?
I'm no spring chicken. I sleep. Usually I have always slept a few hours every night, except maybe the last night if I'm, depending on what time I hit Klondike or, where I am in the race. One year I slept every night. There was a storm coming in and I actually spent the last night in Washington, which I know none of you would do because I'm like, you're in shouting distance at that point. But, there was a barge coming upstream. It was pouring down rain. I, crawled into a tent and slept for a few hours. So I do sleep. I don't sleep, 8 hours, but I try to sleep 3, maybe 4. If I stick my head out of the tent and the river's still coated in fog or something, I might crawl back in there. But usually it's, 3 or 4 hours, night 1 and night 2. So this year I am going to try to not, because I don't know where I would sleep because I don't want to sleep in Miami. It's too early. So I'll push on to Glasgow this year, I assume. So we'll see how that goes. Every other year I have slept at least night 1 and night 2. And then sometimes I push through on night 3. And I have slept at Miami in the past, like 3 times. And usually I do night 2s, mostly been Jeff City. So again, I'm a back of the pack paddler. So you guys are, but that's usually where I've slept historically. Last year I stopped in 2018, I stopped in Dalton Bottoms. I actually didn't paddle last year. I was ground crewing.
Okay.
So, Dalton Bottoms, I'm going to miss that because that was my safety hole if I couldn't quite make it to Glasgow.
Dalton's good. What do you think of Dalton, Denise, as a paddler?
I loved it. I haven't seen it since it washed out, but that was a nice spot. It was just nice knowing it was there. Sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning, I just, or 2 o'clock. I know, I'm getting there late at night, but yeah, I always liked that spot. It was quiet. There's no food, there's no crowds, easy to sleep.
It's tough to get to for the ground crew standpoint because you have to be on the north side of the river and come down south on quite a ways. But as a paddler, I agree with you. I liked it. It was peaceful. There's a little restroom there, but I didn't know it was washed out. Is it washed out now?
The road is washed out.
Oh, okay.
2019. They're talking about maybe fixing it, but it's probably not going to be open. You can still access it from the river, so paddler could still stop there, although the ramp is in pretty rough shape. But ground crew cannot access it at all at this point. It's like 2 miles of hiking and washed out road and puddles. So
okay.
And Ozzy, do you have a sleep strategy?
Yeah, the first year I did it, we slept 4 hours in Glasgow and 5 hours, I think, in Chamois, and found that, well, we don't really feel any better. So last year we slept just over an hour at Franklin, felt pretty good, and then pushed on to Chamois and slept for a cat nap of 20 minutes, which I found out is not enough. I need about an hour to go through a sleep cycle. And if I get an hour, I'm much better shape than if it's just 20 minutes. But we were focused on an end time last year, and we made it. But 20 minutes is a little too little. So I'm aiming for this year. We're probably going to push it a little bit, but aiming for an hour or so, hour and a half maybe total.
Okay.
I'm going to say,
but then again, that's pushing it.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I actually work in the sleep field, and a complete sleep cycle is about 90 minutes. You're pretty close there, Ozzy. So if you can sleep in 90-minute increments, you're going to feel more rested and you're going to wake up feeling better. I know Scott always is like, oh, a 20-minute cat nap, but it's like a 20-minute nap is just enough to get you into slow wave sleep where you're groggy and it's hard to wake up. So,
oh, yes.
And Joe, anything to add about sleep?
What sleep?
If I need to sleep, 45 minutes is what my minimum is, but that's what I shoot for if I have to sleep.
All right. I know for myself, it depends on what I'm doing. The one time I've slept over the last 5 years was a 20-minute nap at Klondike because I was hallucinating so badly that I couldn't actually tell what was reality. And that was enough to clear the cobwebs for another 2-3 hours to get to sunrise. And that was all I was shooting for, because as soon as that sun comes up, everything clears. It just works.
It's amazing how it goes from all figurines everywhere, and then the sun comes up just a little bit and all disappears.
Yeah. So, which brings me to hallucinations. Do your strategies take into account either the decline in speed that you're likely to have as you continue down the race, or things like hallucinations, exhaustion, etc.? And we'll start with Joe on this one.
I'm not going to say that my capability to make decisions doesn't decline, over days without sleep. But I've been very fortunate that I've not had hallucinations to the point that it's been crazy, right? I've typically survived well without a lot of sleep in my life. I don't need tons to function. So I've never really had such serious hallucinations that I thought they were real or that it impacted me. So I can't really answer your question. All
right.
I've seen the train go by on the side of the river, and the light shines over there, and you say, "Wow, that really looks like a dinosaur," in the trees, or an abominable snowman, running across the thing. yeah, it looks like that, you know, or you paddle off the edge of an infinity pool, but you say to yourself, that's just not true. That doesn't exist. So ignore it, please, you know, and just keep going. Right. So,
All right. Ozzy?
Yeah, I had the same, lots of hallucinations last year, to the point where I could not see the river at all. I told Brian in the back that, hey, if you see anything, just let me know and which way to paddle. But no, it's not real. So I don't, get scared or anything out of it. But I just know that it's all the weird stuff that I'm seeing it's just not real. Just keep on paddling, right? Head down and just keep going.
And Denise?
Yeah, those hallucinations are your REM sleep intruding into your wakefulness. So it's really a dream. It's really dream activity coming into your wakefulness. Yeah, I sleep enough. I've never had hallucinations, so I can't really speak to that.
All right. And any different strategy for paddling at night? Anything that any of the panelists want to throw out there for the nighttime paddle? Joe, I see you getting ready there.
yes, I will give so props to my friend Jeff Waters from Texas. He paddled it last year in 2020, and I think they were second or third overall at the time. They were a men's tandem team. They did not have a GPS. They did not have a track they were following. All the time, all the money, all the effort, all the everything, and they got lost in the Dalton Bottoms area, and they couldn't. They were going in circles in the fog, and a safety boat finally came to them and said, "You're going the wrong direction." And they said, "No, we're not." And then they realized they had been paddling in circles in between wing dikes. Lisbon Bottoms, sorry, not Dalton Bottoms, Lisbon Bottoms. They were paddling Lisbon Bottoms for two hours, and made zero progress in 2 hours. And at that point, they were like, "Oh, forget it. We're done." Right? Get a GPS. You can buy a refurbished one or a used one on Amazon for $60 or $80. The track is available. If you need the track, if you can't find it, email me. I have the track. I'll email it to you. Turn on the track at night and follow the track. It's that easy. Like, or the Race Al, or sorry, what's the paddler app? Pro Paddler app.
Pro
right?
Paddler, yeah.
Pro Paddler has it too. Do it. It will save you. I mean, you're killing yourself. You're hamstringing yourself if you don't have a tracking device in the evening, at night when it's dark, because it just tells you where you should be in the river.
Which is funny because, Joe, I have never once run a track in the race. I rely on the tree line and kind of knowing where the river is. But obviously I'm not doing what Joe is. So,
but you know what? I didn't use a GPS at all for the first 6 or 7 years I did the race. I did the same. I'm like, I don't need this. I don't need to spend the money. I don't. And then as soon as I did it the first time, I think actually it was with Ryan Sleebost in 2012. It was his GPS, and I said, "Oh my gosh, okay, I'm sold now." And now I realize, like, it will save you hours, right? Because you don't have to worry. You can just my triangles on the track. I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm not going to run into a wing dike. I'm not going to run into a tree. I'm where I'm supposed to be, because sometimes you see a little funny at night, right?
Yeah, and for liability reasons, things like barges and buoys are not on GPSs.
No.
Just throwing
But that's
that
why
out.
that's why you have ears. That's why you have ears, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we had the same last year. We did not do a GPS track, and in the middle of the night, in some fog, we bounced, not floated, but bounced over a wing dike. Luckily, no hole or anything like that. But after that, we had big ice going down the river, trying to figure out where we were going. And luckily, we found another boat that had the Pro Paddler app with them, and we just followed them for quite a few hours. So it's like Joe said, it's worth spending a few dollars on a GPS track or an Android phone with a Pro Paddler app on it.
And Denise?
Yeah, I agree totally. I use it 100% at night. I use the Pro Paddler app. I actually just bought a Garmin, but the Pro Paddler app has worked real well for me. So.
Okay. And what is one thing that we haven't covered that would be particularly important for race strategy? Let's start with Ozzy on this one.
One thing, I would be as prepared as possible before you take off. What to eat, what to bring with, what's in the boat, what's not, what's the ground crew's role, what's the paddler's role, so that I think we all have seen enough race teams that are standing on the bank asking, what do you want? What do you need? Do you have this? Do you have that? Taking up a tremendous amount of time on the bank. So having all that planned out, all those details planned out, I think will help no matter what you're shooting for. If it's by front of the pack or back of the pack, is to minimize that time on the bank, right? And being ready and prepared for it.
Okay. Joe?
I could not agree more. That's it. You plan and be ready to adjust, but your ground crew is your saving grace, right? So like, I mean, we always have, every year I have a meeting, the day before the race or 2 days before the race. We'll get together, whether it's if I'm a solo and I have 2 ground crew, or if I'm a team and we have 3 or 4 or 5 ground crew. We sit down, we have we buy them dinner, we have a plan, we go through every step, we go through every contingency step, and we say, this is what we're planning on doing, but we have to be ready to adjust, because your ground crew is what's going to get you to the finish, right?
Absolutely.
So love your ground crew and be good to them.
Denise?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. As much planning as possible, and just, sticking with the plan where you can, being flexible when weather, fog, whatever, throws you for a loop.
Okay. And Joe, you had brought up earlier something I just want to ask you about. You had brought up quick handoffs, like at Napoleon and that sort of thing, where you paddle up and your ground crew gives you a couple of things. Why do you do that instead of throw bag, which is becoming an increasing piece of conversation around the 340 the last few years?
Well, I mean, we have done what's called the bag toss, but I guess it depends on your comfort level of how you receive it. The point is, when I say handoff, yeah, I mean, it's basically like, I just don't want to stop, right? If you come to a complete stop, then there's always another reason or two to stay stopped.
Yeah,
I got you.
So just get close, and just, and they actually put it in a dry bag for me, right?
Okay.
And they throw, so if I do drop it or whatever, it falls in the ground, falls in the water, it doesn't sink. But they kind of just toss it out there to me and I grab it.
Okay. Awesome. I want to deal with a couple of the questions that we've had. Joe, you'll probably answer this one. During the shootout a couple days ago, how much of a bump did the river give the paddlers?
We were at 42,000 cubic feet per second, I think, right? CFS 2 days ago. So I would say that was probably around a 3 mile an hour bump.
Okay.
Maybe a 2.8 to 3.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I saw something similar online. Someone posted around 2.8, give or take.
Yeah, I mean, I finished with a 9.5, and I figure I can probably do 6 easily, maybe 6.2. So, you add that with 2.8, 3, that's kind of where you are.
Okay. And then there was a question earlier about sticking around and waiting for another boat who's paddling the same speed for safety companionship purposes. How important is that to stick with someone, especially if it's, your first year, you're at night, etc.? Let's go with Denise on this one.
I've certainly done that. I feel like there's enough paddlers on night one for those of us at the back of, the middle of the pack or the back of the pack. If something were to happen, there's always someone coming down the river behind you. So I feel like night one is not a real big issue, but after that, sometimes night 2 or night 3 for me, I am by myself out there. So sometimes, yeah, I have done that before. Again, if you're not trying for the podium if I find somebody that I can paddle, their pace isn't painfully slow to me, or I'm not, overextending myself to keep up with them, I would take a little bit of a cut in my speed sometimes just to have some company at night, if that were an issue. But I don't feel like it's as important on night 1. Sometimes on night 2, I'll if I can find someone to paddle with, I will. Again, I wouldn't give up a mile per hour for it or anything, but if they were close enough to my pace, I think I would do that.
Yeah, and Ozzy, Joe, sticking around waiting for someone, give him an extra couple of minutes at a checkpoint to paddle with them at night. How important is that? Or
Yeah, I would see it. If I meet them at the ramp and they're wanting really I need to paddle with somebody, yeah, just come along. If we're going to go at our pace, and if you can keep up, great. If not, we're going to drop you. But I don't seek anybody out to paddle with. I like the solitude at night. It's nice.
Spoken like a true Scandinavian.
Yeah, we are loners, right? But you look for that white light in the front and try to beat it, right? And gives you another point of motivation, for me at least. And we met some paddlers between Washington and Klondike at some point, and we slowed down for a little bit. And how you doing? Everything okay? How's it going? You kind of get a cognitive check on people, and if it seems okay, you paddle on.
Okay. I know I've been saved in races on occasion by other paddlers, and it happens even towards the front of the field. There's always stories about guys who fall apart in that stretch from Klondike to the end and get kind of not actually towed in, but metaphorically get towed in by someone. Yeah. It happens, and it's just part of 340 culture. And sometimes having that conversation is enough to motivate you,
Yep. No, I think we always check on no matter what we pass, we always check on paddlers, right? You doing okay? Everything okay? And have a short conversation, but that it kind of ends there.
Okay.
To make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my first year in 2007. I started paddling with a guy named Darren Sugg, and we're still friends to this day. He did the race a few times. He lives in Dallas now, and we paddled like the whole second day together. And he was paddling with somebody. I don't know who it was, but he was paddling with somebody, and they were sharing a ground crew. But that person, had some issues, and Darren was feeling good, so he went on, and we started talking and paddling together. And he said, yeah, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do, for tonight. And I said, well, I've got a spare tent. I've got a spare sleeping bag because I'm a planner. And I said, well, I'll call my brother. He's my ground crew, and we'll set up the tent, and he'll have a tent ready for you. And we became great friends after that. And it was an amazing experience. We paddled all the way, basically from the middle half of the race to the finish line together. That first year, and it was an amazing friendship that developed, and it was amazing fun and an amazing experience that we got to do together. So I would say, balance, your competitiveness, and I say that now knowing that I'm very competitive, but balance it with the experience that you want to get out of this race, because this is a very special. I mean, this is National Geographic Top 100 experiences in the United States, right? I mean, this is an amazing thing, and you can't take that away, right? You're going to develop some amazing friendships and amazing bonds and amazing experiences from this.
Similar to you, Joe. We, me and Brian Harmon, kind of met the night before the race, in 18. And at the start, we're like, well, what pace are you aiming for? Well, pace here. And then we paddled pretty much the whole thing together and did tandem last year. We're doing the White House next year. I mean, the friendship develops, right? So
exactly.
And there's one other thing in strategy that I forgot to talk about, which is strategy at the start. Do you want to try and go out fast, or do you want to try and keep up with the lead packs, etc.? Do you want to? I realize this is kind of aiming towards the people who are hoping to be racer types and such, or do you hold back a little bit and hope to catch them at the back of the race? Let's start with Joe, because he's probably the strategist here on this one.
Thank you. So I will reiterate what I said before. Don't go down a hole. Like Ozzy said before, know where you should at this point. I mean, if you're wanting to be competitive and fast, you should have done some races already. You've done a lot of training. You know kind of where your heart rate is and where your red line is. You know how to monitor that. You know where you need to be. So don't start off too fast and don't go down a hole. But if you can get what my strategy has been, honestly, I'll always watch those greyhounds that run out of there chasing a carrot, and I'm never in first place for the first 50 or 100 miles, because I'll just sit behind them and take the free ride. Hey, if you're gonna go out like that, I'm just gonna sit on your tail and take the free quarter-mile-an-hour draft I get, and then they die, and then I just jump on the next one. I jump on the next one. I jump on the next one, and then by Miami, there we go. So that's one thing. So don't go down the hole, but the other thing is know where you want to be, know your body, and be trained and be prepared.
All right.
Oh, but let me give a call out really fast to a great guy who won the MR340 in the solo class last year. His name's Dustin LeCave. He goes by Duddy, and we passed him because the solos start at 7 a.m. and everybody who's not a solo starts at 8 a.m., right? So we passed him shortly after Miami. He was in 9th place as a soloist. He was in 9th place. And we passed 8 other soloists, between Miami and Glasgow, and we finally passed the last soloist who was in first place by Glasgow. Dustin came all the way back and won the race. So to your point, it is as Scott Mansker always said, 340 miles is a great equalizer. So know your pace, know your body, don't go down the hole, and do your thing, and you can achieve better that way than trying to go out too fast, too hard, and then crash.
All right. Ozzy, Denise, anything you want to add to?
No, same.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right.
No, go ahead, Denise.
I was going to say that, I don't know, this never pops me up. I think that's good advice for anyone, even if you're not trying for the podium. I pass a lot of people early in the race, and that are trying to stay ahead of me, or I catch up to them and they paddle off in a fury, and sometimes they're pulling out at Waverly or Glasgow. So I think you got to know what pace what is your cruising speed, what is your particular cruising speed, and hit that. And hopefully you'll come back next year with a better cruising speed. But for whatever your training speed is this year for this boat in this river, you can't be going, your heart can't beat 180 180 beats a minute for 4 days. You've got to 3 days, whatever,
Exactly.
You guys don't go down the hole, just what Joe said. And that even goes for people at the back of the pack. It's just a different.
It's all relative. No, it's all relative, right? You don't want to go down that hole.
Yeah.
One of the paddles we did before the 340 last year was to figure out our relative effort and what it feels like pushing the boat. And we kind of found a groove, if you will, or a speed. This is how it feels. This is how the pace we're going to have. So if the river gives you more, great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. But too many people in any race, be running, biking, whatever it is, you always have people who are excited. We've thought about this for months and months. We trained and we're just going to go out and win this thing. And then 30 miles down the river, they are floating and on their cell phone, exhausted. And now you have a long hole to get out of. So I let people go for it. I have a speed or an effort that I am aiming for. And then I'm going to keep that effort for the whole trip. And we did that in the shootout too. Just this weekend, me and Rusty, I don't know what place we were at in the beginning, but it was middle of the pack maybe. And we just had the same cruising speed the entire time and did okay. And floated by a few people that they gave up. They put out too much effort too fast. So no matter where you want to be in the race, don't go all out. You have days of this. Days.
Run your race. Run your own race.
Yes, run your own race. Find your own speed or your own effort.
All right. So it is coming to 8 o'clock, which means we're going to be tying this up. Before thanking my panelists, I want to say the next webinar will be specific for ground crew. This will be ground crew from the ground crew perspective, talking about where to find the checkpoints, how to get from point A to point B. What do you need to know? Why is Walmart important? And why do you want to know where Casey's is? Because they have the best tasting water and French donuts. But leave that aside.
And chicken wings.
Yeah, chicken wings. There you go. Those are the perfect food on the river, let me tell you. But we'll be talking about ground crew. I know that my wife, Megan, who has been my ground crew for 7 years, will be on there. And then I'm getting a couple others who are longtime veterans as well. So this will be a great one for the paddler, but also for the ground crew. That will be June 21st at 6:30 p.m. Otherwise, that leaves only one last thing for me to do, which is to thank the panel. Denise, fantastic. Thank you for all the hard work. Ozzy, for help. Thank you for hopping in at the last minute. Joe, as always, your expertise is always, something that we appreciate. And until next time, this is 340 Paddler, hoping that you keep your paddle in the water.